Well, I'm honored and privileged to be joined here today at the Center for American Studies by none other than Giancarlo Esposito. Giancarlo, thank you so much for being here and welcome to Rome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Giancarlo Esposito is a celebrated film, television, and stage actor, director, and producer with a career spanning nearly 5 decades. He has won numerous accolades, including 2 Critics' Choice Television Awards and a Hollywood Critics Association TV Award for his iconic portrayal of drug kingpin Gustavo Gus Fring in Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. His most recent projects include Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis, the horror movie Maxine, Marvel's upcoming Captain America Brave New World. His other television roles include Stan Edgar in the Amazon series The Boys, Moff Gideon in the Disney Plus show The Mandalorian, and he also starred in the Netflix series Dear White People, Kaleidoscope, and The Gentleman. How are you enjoying the city so far?
Oh, how am I enjoying the city? What is not to enjoy? This is the most beautiful city in the world, and it's always wonderful to come back to Italia. My father is from Naples, and he came to Rome when he was probably 20 and never left. And so it's always a joy to come here because there's such inspiration in all the buildings, and the people are lovely, and the food is fantastic.
Right.
It's nice.
Well, it's definitely good to have you. And speaking of Rome, I mean, one of your most recent movies is Megalopolis, and it's set in an alternate modern day New York City, which is called New Rome, if I'm correct. And can you tell us a bit about your character, Franklin Caesar, and how it was being on the set with Francis Ford Coppola?
Francis Ford Coppola is a genius. Coppola does things that no other filmmaker does. And when he
Right.
came to me with this movie, he told me the story of the Roman Senate. Um, and it was a very interesting story about Caesar and Cicero, and how Cicero was the greatest orator in that Roman time, but he was also the head of the Senate. And the Senate was what Caesar wanted to join. And he tried 6 times to join the Senate, and he wasn't voted in. And then he tried to coup, and they ran him out of town. And he went back with his army and came back and tried to coup one more time, and they ran him away again. It was a story that is true to history, and Francis wanted it to resemble New Rome and what's going on not only in the city of New York and major cities, but in our American politics. So he took this fable, he made a fable out of history, and he kept referring back to the events of the day because he's very knowledgeable in Roman history. So I found it fascinating to work with him. It was interesting to play a man who wasn't evil, but was old school. So you probably have the same situation here in Rome, where you have new young minds who are looking to change things for the better for all people. And you have older minds who say, stick with what works. And sometimes sticking with what has worked in the past does not work for today.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. So it's a kind of adaptation, historical adaptation, with taking all of those elements from ancient Roman history and translating them into an alternate 21st century New York City.
Absolutely, but those elements that he translated weren't exacting.
Yeah.
So he has other stories also in the film and other ideas in the film, which is what make Megalopolis such an extravagant and unusual movie.
Well, I mean, the sheer ambition just by watching the trailer makes me want to rush to theaters so bad. And how do you think people are going to take this movie?
I think this movie will be taken with a scratch on the head. Filmmakers will really love it.
I love that.
Other people will try to figure it out. But I do believe that this movie will be a classic. I can only remember back to Apocalypse Now when it came out, and it was not a hit movie. And people thought no one is ever going to see this movie. As time went on, people caught on to this movie, and now it is a classic film. I believe Megalopolis will be a classic as well.
Will be the same thing. I exactly know what you're saying, because that happened with Apocalypse Now, which is such a cult movie. It's such a great movie right now, and you portrayed an incredible amount of characters, and your range of interpretation is extraordinary. But I would like to move on to one of my favorite shows of all time, which features one of my absolute favorite characters of all time, and of course that's drug lord Gus Fring. Can you tell us a bit about how Vince Gilligan approached you for the role?
Vince approached me through a casting director, and I was told everyone has to read. And at that point in time, I was finished auditioning or reading for things. And the casting director said to me, if you read, you'll get it, because Vince wants to see how you look now and how you interpret his words. So I went in and read for it, and I was out of town doing something in another country. And the casting director who had the camera in front of me kept giving me direction on how to read it differently. And I had a very distinct idea as to what I wanted to do with it, because I could feel from the writing, and I didn't know Vince what he wanted. So every time we went back to the beginning, I did it the same way. I wouldn't take her direction, which was leading me in the wrong way. Vince is very specific. I think he writes what he knows, and he researched this particular piece to the nth degree, and he had an idea about, an anti-hero, a villain, a fallen hero. And I came into the show because I think he really wanted to have a villain who could sustain that role. Before I came to the show, there was the villain of the day, and there were different characters who took that role on. And then he wrote for me once he saw me perform.
Right. And what's your favorite moment, scene, memory from that experience?
They're all my favorite. I happen to love when actors don't talk a lot. When there's silence in the space. And so I would have to say 401 Box Cutter is one of my favorites, because I'm a very physical actor. And so I'm also very good with words. So when I don't have to speak, I can just act with my body, because I think acting is physical as well.
Oh, absolutely. And that's exactly what happens with Gus Fring. He says so much without actually using any words, just by his posture, his stare, and that I love that so much. And if there was a role that a role that you never played before, if you that you would love to be able to play in the future, what would that be?
I like historical characters. I've always wanted to, and have thought of playing Pushkin. A very great poet, artist, musician.
Yes.
Of mixed race from the other part of the world. So that's one I'm toying with, that I would love to be able to try to conquer one day if I can find the right story. There's also the story of Toussaint Louverture, who was from Haiti, and his story about how he tried to lead his people to freedom all those years ago was also important. Freedom from the French at that time, and I mention him because Haiti is in such a disparate place right now.
Yes, I would love to. I would love to see that story. Once you said that acting in the presence of other actors, it should feel like a tennis match. What do you mean by that? Just like a balance of.
When I was doing Megalopolis, every morning at 6 a.m., I'd get texts from Francis guiding me to an ancient Roman story, and I would read that story and go, "What does this have to do with what we're shooting today?" And then I started to realize that he was trying to, cultivate my brain to think on a larger historical Romanesque level. So that's what I mean. I think that the art of directing has been lost, in that we want to have a direct conversation about what we're talking about now. But sometimes as a director, you have to stimulate someone's brain to guide them to have the thought, to guide them to be inspired. And I think inspiration comes in many different ways. How many directors have I been with? Probably zero, who would come into this room and just have me stand here and stare at the ceiling and ask me about the Cupids and ask me about my father was like this. My father, Giancarlo Esposito, could walk into a room and he would notice what the history said. And I have no idea. I'm like, what's going on in this painting? I stand there a while and look. Okay, these guys have a beef. These guys are threatening to kill that guy.
Right,
this dude is playing the trumpet. But what is really happening? And, I think that for me, I like to be able to have that kind of inspiration, given to me, or have me allow it. And film today is very different. It's 1, 2, 3. It's very corporate and political. It's less creative. So working with Francis was really creative. Going to the museum with my father when I was in Rome, when he was alive, he's passed on now, was really wonderful because he could tell me, he'd ask a question, what's going on there? What do you think? And I would say exactly what I just said. And then he would say to me, this is what's really happening. So that's inspiration.
Well, the story, always finding the story behind like
That's
everything.
right. Yeah. I mean, to me, just the story of Cicero, knowing that I was playing Francis, my name is Franklin, his name is Francis, like most directors put themselves into every character in the movie. So it was very clear to me that a part of me, part of Francis was inside me. And I understood that and knew that. And so to be able to serve him in a way that he deserves as that character, and to make him not a nefarious bad guy. When you see the film, you'll understand that my character makes the largest transition. And that was a choice for me as an actor.
I can't wait, yeah. Well, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for your time, Giancarlo.
Oh, my pleasure.